Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night. This is Jack Nicholson. We're going to have a night for the Halloween show. And we got Mark Eddy here from Dolphin Land. And we got Jay. We got David Goudsward. Am I saying that right? Say your name one good time. Goudsward.
Close enough that I recognize it.
It's my Georgia. Goudsward. But anyway, it's great to have you here, Dave. We're doing an H.P. Lovecraft show. I always try to make Halloween very special. Next week is Tyrone Ellington, and that's like a prehistory, Renaissance, and ancient aliens. And then our final Halloween show is Jacob Matati put out a comic called Pumpkin Guts, the Hellbound Halloween, and he has hearses and goes to like hearse conventions. He also has a card just like Christine from the Stephen King movie. So that'll be our final Halloween show. And then that Friday we're taking a break. So we don't do a show on Halloween, that's for sure. But or Thanksgiving or Christmas. But anyway, great to have you here. Florida representing. Were you born here?
No, I was born in New England.
New England. Okay, cool.
You'll notice it as I talk. I tend to drop my R's when I'm not paying attention.
Well, it's great to have you here, and definitely looking forward to it. I guess my first question is, I'm trying to figure out, you're working on a book that involves H.P. Lovecraft in Florida. What, if you could tell us a little bit about, I didn't even know there was a Florida connection to H.P. Lovecraft. What is that Florida connection?
Well, the Florida connection is there's this land down south and in north of, and let's see how to put it best. H.P. Lovecraft hated the cold. That's the easiest way to explain it. So there was a lot of appeal to go south for him. And he was also broke, but he had an advantage in that he was in the middle of the Great Depression. Of course, in Florida, the entire economy had collapsed. We didn't know the difference. The land bubble had burst. People were already broke. So the Great Depression, I don't think that Florida noticed. But Lovecraft was able to relay that information and get on a Greyhound bus, come down to Florida. And his first visit was to St. Augustine. He absolutely loved it. And he would come back 2 more times. In fact, he would have come back 3 or 4 more times. And quite frankly, he probably would have moved to Florida had he lived beyond 1937. He visited St. Augustine, like I said. He absolutely adored it, the antiquity, which was mostly tourist-oriented at that point. He visited Tampa Bay, Dunedin specifically, where he stayed with Henry Whitehead, who was another pulp author. Then took a bus across Florida down to Miami to Key West. Stayed in Key West, came back to Miami, stayed in St. Augustine, went back to Providence. That was the first trip. The second trip, he couldn't afford to do all that, so he took a friend up on a open invitation and went to DeLand, take your pick. I don't know how they pronounce it up there anymore. But it's a tiny little college town, and Stetson University, and he stayed with Robert Barlow. Now, Barlow was a teen who absolutely had no friends, no interest in anything other than collecting fiction. He stayed there for 3 months, and then went to St. Augustine and then went home. The second time he visited Barlow was even longer, and then Barlow came to visit him in Providence. Barlow then went to Kansas City, studied art, went to San Francisco, became an activist poet, then went to Mexico and became one of the leading experts in Aztec language. I throw that out simply to give Barlow a little more faceted approach. He was named the literary executor of Lovecraft's estate. The problem is he was 17 when he became the literary executor. He wasn't expecting it. certainly Lovecraft wasn't expecting to die that soon. And more importantly, August Derleth thought he was going to be the literary executor and then proceeded to spend the rest of Barlow's life undermining him. They made him a pariah in the Lovecraft circle. And all because, well, that's a different story for a different time. That's not Florida by that point. His big connection in Florida is Robert Barlow and the whole area around Daytona, which technically is D-Land. So 3 visits, certainly not as literarily significant as, let's say, his visits to Salem or Marblehead or even Haverhill and Newburyport. Newburyport became and Ipswich became the Innsmouth. But there are elements in his stories that reflect his time in Florida. The final big story by Lovecraft, The Shadow Out of Time, he talks about the background noise in this ancient, millions of years old land, which sounds an awful lot to me like rainy season in Florida, with the frogs and the crickets and the noise coming from whatever is out in the yard. And I don't know what's out in the yard, to be honest, but it is noisy. So there are little elements like that. The most important aspect really is how the fight between Barlow and Derleth influenced the future of Lovecraft literature. If these two hadn't been fighting, there's no telling where it could have gone. So they're important visits, but they're not big visits in terms of people who just want to read the fiction. If you want to understand the nuts and bolts under the hood of the fiction, then it becomes more important.
And I know you said there was a Robert Bloch connection. What was the connection with that in Lovecraft?
Robert Bloch, like a lot of other teens, wrote fan mail to Lovecraft for stories in Weird Tales. Lovecraft would get the letters from Chicago, where Weird Tales was headquartered, and he would write them back. And it started a long correspondence. In fact, there's a story that Bloch wrote that's set in Providence, and the protagonist is remarkably Lovecraft-like, to the point where Bloch is using photographs of Lovecraft's study to describe the room that the protagonist takes. Dies a horrible death at the end, which Lovecraft specifically wrote him permission to kill him. Lovecraft, in a later story, then returned the favor and killed him off as well. So there's a real interplay, and we don't know how much influence Lovecraft had. We know he had a lot in terms of getting Robert Bloch started. If you read Robert Bloch's autobiography, there's no question that they had a correspondence that was robust. In fact, the letters have been published by Hippocampus Press as part of their 20 gazillion volume set of the collected letters of Lovecraft. They're not trading story ideas, but Lovecraft is critiquing, he's suggesting little changes to stories, and Bloch is picking it up on him. Now, the interesting part of this is we don't know for sure how much influence Lovecraft had, because even Bloch couldn't keep track of how many stories he was writing. He was literally, in the Depression, keeping his family afloat, writing stories. He was banging out a story a day. He had so many aliases, even he didn't keep track of them all. So there could be dozens more short stories in Astounding Tales or Weird Tales or science fiction or cowboys. It doesn't matter. He banged out a story for it. It could have Lovecraft influence. We can't find it if the author can't find it.
Definitely. And what were some of Lovecraft's influences, other authors that influenced him? I've heard of different ones. I can't remember their names right now, but what was some of the things that fed into his madness with all of this?
madness is such a harsh word. I prefer perception of reality altered slightly.
I understand, and I usually use madness for me.
Well, I don't know you that well, so I can't help.
All right, go ahead.
My background is history, not psychology.
Hmm.
Lovecraft himself was influenced by Edgar Allan Poe. Then again, who wasn't in that time period? Poe was still the king. Lovecraft visits all of the Poe houses that are still extant. The cottage in Bronx, the Philadelphia house, the Baltimore. In fact, he almost got caught in a hurricane in Richmond because he stopped there on his way home to see the house. So you always got, when you ask who influenced Poe, that's a different story. But you ask who influenced Lovecraft, Poe. You can almost put it in a Venn diagram of Poe, Lovecraft, King. They're all interconnected. They're all influenced, obviously not by each other, because I'm pretty sure King wasn't even born yet, but that's a big one. Arthur Machen was another one. But there is a long essay called Supernatural Literature that Lovecraft did. And it lists every major story by his opinion. Of course, I'm blanking on the actual full title, but it's not hard to find. It's been reprinted by everybody from Dover on up. And there are some people in there that you don't think of as horror writers that he considers to be significant writers of weird fiction. And he does differentiate. He doesn't like violence on screen. He doesn't like violence on page. He likes the original stuff. He absolutely hated Dracula with Bela Lugosi. Liked Bela Lugosi, hated the movie. Frankenstein sent him into apoplectic fits. It was so far away from his beloved original story. And technically, if you look at the book and you look at the movie, they're really not that similar. So Lovecraft was a vacuum. He took in everybody, anything, Lord Dunsany, and they weren't influences in the sense that he had a period where he's writing pastiche, but you can definitely see where he had a Dunsany period where he was working with certain sequences and certain concepts in certain language that are different from, let's say, Dunwich Horror, which is 100% Lovecraft. Lovecraft liked to put, well, we call them, let's put it this way, we call them influences. Well, he was inspired by the mountains of Attle in Wilbraham, Massachusetts, and that's how Dunwich ended up out there. Not necessarily. Lovecraft had this very odd sense of humor in his literature. Lovecraft was not a professional writer. Period. Lovecraft was an amateur who wrote for himself and wrote for his friends who just happened to get published in major publications. That's the way he saw it. So when he's writing things with inside jokes that only his friends would get. So Attle and Wilbraham, yes, those are the descriptions of Dunwich. But Wilbraham and Attle are also where several figures in amateur journalism happen to live, specifically Edith Miniter. And Edith Miniter's particularly shows up in a lot of his stories, but you'd never recognize her unless you know his sense of humor. The best example I can give you is if you recall The Mountains of Madness. At the end of it, the hero is fleeing with his partner, and the partner is having a complete mental breakdown. And he starts yelling out the names of subway stops in Boston because the thing that's chasing them reminds him of a trolley train. It's so big and long and segmented. That particular series of stops in the Boston subway are the Red Line today. And the Red Line stops that he quotes are specifically from the South Station out to where Edith Miniter lived. And they've added a couple more stops since then. But if you look at the original subway, that is the route Lovecraft would have taken from Providence, get off the train or the bus at the South Station, get on the subway, take the Red Line out to Edith Miniter's house, where the amateur journalists all met. So, nobody's going to get that, except for Edith Miniter and a handful of amateur journalists. And it's like that everywhere in his stories.
Yeah, Dave, you and your brother took a lot of photos of these places, and you have them in your Lovecraft books. You're plotting these things out. The rail line going out to Edith's house. What you do as a historian really does help your reader to they can walk these same routes or drive there, have a experience that he Lovecraft would have seen, and it's almost like the Dickens walking tours of London, which are very popular. You get the Jack the Ripper tours as well. I think that's one of the really nice things about your writings is, okay, you recreate that route. You can do it yourself and check the descriptions in which the Dunwich Horror, which whatever book we're discussing.
Well, I went to my history degree is based on local history, because everybody. What was the example I just used? Everybody remembers the Boston Tea Party. But does anybody remember why there was a Boston Tea Party?
It was over taxes on, I believe, tea.
Yes, but what led to that?
Oh, the English were a bunch of, buttheads keeping all the money for themselves.
It's more complicated than that. There were other taxes. I mean, colonial windows in New England, if you look at them, they're all 8 panes. Little panes, because Britain was taxing window glass by the size of the window. So you put little frames, and you had an 8-pane smaller tax-free window. That is the mentality. They were tighten the screws on England, New England specifically. But the reason they were tightening the screws is because England was going broke. They kept losing wars. So
they were spread at that point. They were spread very far and thin.
I mean, they don't want to pay taxes, but then again, so do I. But I'm not going to go out and do something like that.
Well, I mean, paying taxes is one thing, but paying taxes on everything, like a pane of glass. I didn't know that. That's an interesting historical fact that you brought up. I think that's fantastic. I mean, there are some things that are happening. In my old state of Maryland, they used to try to have a rain tax. How they can tax me on something that falls out of the sky. So that would certainly, I would understand, if I was back in the revolutionary times, I would definitely want to start a fight with England because I'm not paying for how big the glass is in the house that I built with my hand. Wow.
Well, the problem was we imported most of everything originally. The only things New Englanders exported were lumber and,
minerals,
molasses, and
minerals and
molasses
gold
was coming in as rum. So,
yeah.
But it, so we, you have us over the barrel, so to speak. You can tax the barrel, but by that point, we were isolated. England had been off fighting wars. They were ignoring the colonies in North America. So they started innovating. We started building our own foundries. We started doing our own mining. We started building different types of ships and it, you get a taste of independence. You don't want the short leash anymore.
Yeah.
And Dave, you do mention some of the cemeteries where these people, the amateur authors are buried.
I'll do you one better than that, Mark. I put up the headstone for Tryout Smith, the amateur publisher in Haverhill, that basically published most of Lovecraft's earliest poetry.
Okay, and you visit a lot of the colonial homes that HP, walk by.
Well, you can do that better in Providence. In Haverhill, he found an interesting phenomena, which was they had gone in, and this is Lovecraft's observation. As someone from Haverhill, I can't say he's accurate or not. I don't think he's 100% on this one, but his point is valid. Haverhill leapt into industrialization so early on, they did not have a colonial neighborhood. They did not have a downtown Providence. You can go walk down a street and it's a historic neighborhood. Haverhill's historic neighborhood district are Queen Anne brick shoe factories from the 1880s because they were all built at the same time. So the observation he makes is we had no colonial history left, so we went back further. And his specific examples were Winnikinny Castle, which was it was a Victorian folly by a local wealthy man who basically built a 2-story fieldstone castle, surrounded it with wood, surrounded it with lakes, and Lovecraft did visit it. And the Haverhill Country Club, which was being built at the time he was going past it, and that was a Tudor stick style house. So they were inventing earlier colonial history, pre-colonial Regent period era stuff, because they had none of their own. Not 100% accurate, but Haverhill's historical buildings are very scattered. So you see that sort of observation. Now, drive 8 miles down the road to Newburyport. That's a far more interesting town from the perspective of people who want to see Lovecraft's brain in action. Newburyport is where Shadow over Innsmouth begins. The protagonist is coming into Newburyport. He's doing his family tree he's from Ohio or someplace out. He's an outsider. That's the key in all of his stories. He is charmed by the city. He stays at the YMCA. He visits the library. His next step is going to be going down to Arkham. But when he finds out how expensive the train is, he decides to take a bus. And it leaves the square, drives down to Arkham, but it stops in Innsmouth. Innsmouth's description is also Newburyport. The part of Newburyport that Lovecraft liked, the federal buildings, the cobblestone, the stately library, the giant sprawling YMCA, that's all in this book as Newburyport. The other side of the street, which is the clam shacks and the dirt roads and the trolley track going right down the middle of the road, and if you were moving your boat, you got it out of the way, or you were going to buy a new boat. That part he hated. It was decaying, it was decrepit, it was crumbling. That's Innsmouth. So basically, Innsmouth is the half of Newburyport that Lovecraft didn't like. You put the two together, you got Newburyport. You separate them, you've got the Shadow over Innsmouth. That's the way his brain worked.
Jeffrey, are you developing a greater understanding of your literary hero Lovecraft after this show? And we're only
Going deep. It's going deep for sure. A lot of stuff I don't know about him. I enjoy his stories, and I've enjoyed the movies that spawn, which they never seem to. Not many movies hit the mark. They usually, most Lovecraft movies, except maybe some of the Jeffrey Combs ones, kind of suck. But he's influenced a lot. I mean, I'm no expert on Lovecraft, that's for sure. So I'm learning a lot.
Yeah, this is a basically a college course in Lovecraft
Definitely.
studies.
Oh, this is the easy stuff. You want to read the book if you want the hard stuff.
Yeah, and
I'll give you an example.
Go ahead.
I'm going to say one word, and you will recognize it. Necronomicon.
Yeah.
The Necronomicon does not exist. Within Lovecraft's lifetime, people were writing, asking him where they could get a copy. That's how realistic he painted it. But he painted it in broad strokes and encouraged everybody else to use it. So it's in August Derleth books. It's in, I think Block uses it a couple of times, and other authors. Basically, he considered it a shared universe before that was a term that you used.
Yeah, it's very similar. Ghostbusters does a similar thing where they're talking about how to do research on, the name Zool and all that, and they're like, well, why don't we look in Space Catalog? Yeah, we'll try Tobin's Spirit Guide. They don't exist either. They do now post movies. They've had somebody go and Ghostwrite, put them up. But they're after the movies, I'm like, I want to go to the library see if I can find these. And you go to the bookstore either, and they're like, nope, doesn't exist. I'm like, damn it.
The Necronomicon, we've had Peter Levenda on, who was part of that Simon Collective that wrote that crazy little weird spell book and all that little paperback. That's a weird ass book, even though it's probably not real, but there's still a creepiness to it. But my question is, with Lovecraft and the creatures he creates, and there's just an eeriness that's not there with a lot of other authors, or not on that level. It's like an otherworldly, just a creepiness. It's like talking about a skinwalker or something. It just gives you the creeps, his creatures, just the way wherever he pulled from his imagination or other freaking worlds. I don't know, but there's something to them. I'm getting goosebumps just talking about them. It's like they know I'm talking about
the master. The light touch of the master. Anybody and everybody can use the Necronomicon. In fact, if you look at the Necronomicon as a separate entity unto itself, it's a book. And now it's a shorthand for this is a book of bad things. You shouldn't open it. Oops, you opened it. Now the story has a plot.
Yeah.
In fact, it diverged. There are actually two different directions it went in. And one is, it starts with Bruce Campbell, God bless him, and The Living Dead, or what the name of his movies?
Well, the best one, The Army of Darkness.
Evil
Dead.
You can tell I'm a big movie fan. But the first movie, it's not called the Necronomicon. That name doesn't pick up until the second movie. The book with the face on it has become the archetype of what the Necronomicon looks like. And That's entirely an invention of the movie. In fact, at this point, Japan uses the face book. Hey, I like that. I got it. The original Facebook. They use it as a shorthand. They don't even have to say it's the Necronomicon. They just show you the book with the face on it. You know it's the Necronomicon. You know bad things are about to happen to your favorite cartoon character. Excuse me, to your favorite manga and anime character. And that's just a prop. I mean, everybody's used it from Ghostbusters on up. And I like the Ghostbusters cartoon as much as the next guy, but the inside jokes there would be very, very more amusing if people realized some of them. But anyway, that's Lovecraft. He's a cultural phenomena that everybody else is using, and most people use badly. Herbert West is way too gory for Lovecraft's personal taste. But then again, he never liked the Herbert West story. He agreed to do it. He banged out these 6 serial parts that were literally not supposed to be connected as a novel. When he needed a story to fill the contract, he'd bang out another story, cookie cutter, Herbert West, boom, boom, boom. But he was finished. He never considered that anything other than grunt work. But look at the legs it has. Herbert West has got movies, he's got toys, he's got if you ever see Pete Rawlik, he's done an entire universe of fiction based on the Herbert West universe.
And that's one thing that I did want to ask you about. It was the movie industry. I mean, Lovecraft died before the first synchronized sound and sound for talking. But he was around to hear the first synchronized sound with sound, music backdrops and sound effects backdrops. I wonder if anyone knows what his thoughts of that, because the industry was brand new. I mean, it was only 10 years old. Movies at the time when he was in his old age, how old he was, I didn't catch the date. But 1937 is when he died, in October is when the first movie came out. He died in March, so he didn't get to see what we are now, the industry we have now. So I wonder how he thought the industry, if it was going to be a flop, because it probably was at first. People were like, oh, it's just a fad, it'd be like the hula hoop. In 10 years, nobody will know what it is.
Well, he did not like the horror movies, Universal. I mean, he didn't like Dracula, didn't like Frankenstein. Don't think he ever saw the rest of them, like White Zombie. His favorite movie, as far as we can tell, was Berkeley Square.
Oh, wow.
Which, if you think about it, is a time travel movie. So, shadow out of time. People are moving through time different. It's when you think Lovecraft, you don't think fluffy little lighthearted rom-com.
No.
That's basically all Berkeley Square is.
That's cool. I wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah, your life's not complete if you haven't seen White Zombie.
When Lovecraft was staying with Whitehead, that's when the books on zombies first started showing up. And the book that they basically made White Zombie from was a book that Whitehead had in his collection and thought it was remarkably bad. Whitehead had previously been a Anglican Episcopalian minister in the Caribbean, the West Indies, Dutch West, not the Dutch, we owned it. They were the U.S. Virgin Islands by the time he was done. And he was a strong supporter of U.S. Virgin Islands, which were sold to the United States from one of the Scandinavian countries on the condition that they weren't subject to prohibition, because the U.S. Virgin Islands under their previous name, were one of the major suppliers of rum to Europe. And the first thing the U.S. did was slap the embargo on it and enforce prohibition, which destroyed their economy to this day and really annoyed most of everybody who liked rum in Europe. And Whitehead fought that. He fought for them all his life. And he was a big deal. He was one of the people invited to see Charles Lindbergh land on. So it's an odd situation because Lovecraft was given the book. I think it's Paul Marot's book on zombies, but Whitehead, who actually experienced hoodoo or Jumbie, I guess is what they were calling it, really didn't have any use for the book. So I kind of think that may have influenced why Lovecraft did not see it. And that's, of course, assuming it came out within his lifetime. I don't know what year they made White Zombie. I think it was before he died, but somebody with a better internet connection than I can spot check that.
The funny thing that you mentioned with the rum, I've got two funny anecdotes for it. And one of them revolves around the old, Navy pirate days. They used to attribute rum as to having medicinal purposes for curing scurvy on the boats. And it wasn't until later on that they found it was the limes they were using to cut the flavor of the raw rum. So that they thought it was medicinal. And then later, even in modern times, later on in I think it was the Korean War, where they had the MASH units, the TV show MASH. They used to prescribe gin and tonics for people who were in jeopardy of malaria or already had malaria, because I don't know if the doctors knew it or not, but the quinine in the tonic water cured the malaria, but they weren't sure if it was the gin. So they just, when they didn't have penicillin,
drink the gin.
Yeah, they would give them gin and tonics because they weren't sure if it was the gin or the tonic that was curing the malaria. But when they ran out of penicillin, it's the only way to save the troops from dying of this very curable disease in the middle of, tropical South Korea.
Rum has a fascinating history. There must be a book or two on the history of rum out there.
I'm sure of it.
My knowledge is limited to what was going on with Whitehead, and
I'm sure if we could all go back in time. I'm sure if we could all go back in time and spend an hour with Joe Kennedy Sr., JFK and RFK's father, I'm sure we could get a lot of stories of the old rum runner days.
Well, at least we'd know how to get it into the country.
Correct, yeah.
But apparently rum is made with molasses.
Yes.
But there is rum agricole, which is a French variation, which is made directly from the sugar cane. And the French islands, of course, weren't under prohibition, so they were making their stuff. And apparently, if you don't drink it, you can use it for furniture stripper. It's so powerful.
Wow.
I mean, this stuff will take the enamel off your teeth level.
Oh, no. Well, they say the same thing about Coca-Cola. Go to YouTube and just look up Coca-Cola and trailer hitch, and there's a guy that takes literally a 2-liter bottle of Coca-Cola and a green scrubby, like a dish scrubby, pours it on his shiny chrome trailer ball hitch. And after, I don't know how long it took him. It probably took him all day. They don't, they compress the time on those videos. But the Coca-Cola, apparently, if he didn't use any other chemicals, it looks in the video like Coca-Cola will strip chrome straight off a piece of metal.
Yeah, makes you want to run out and have one. Maybe rum and Coke.
Yeah, which I do. I used to enjoy those, but they give me heartburn. So I prefer, when I was in college, I was a bartender, and one of my specialties was floating liqueurs. There's a shot called a B-52, which is 3 different liqueurs floated one on top of the other, which is not hard to do, but you have to know how to do it. And then my other specialty was daiquiris. And I used to host daiquiri parties at my apartment. My roommate and I would call, his girlfriend and her friends would come over, and we'd have, 4 or 5 daiquiris, watch movies and TV. So I'm very familiar with rum and the daiquiri medicinal effects of it.
I hate drinking and I prefer weed, but that eggnog that comes out during the holidays, Evan Williams with like rum, bourbon, and whiskey, I do that, but I try to be careful because I really don't like drinking that much.
I have to say, if I don't know where are you in Florida, David? You said?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if there's Rudders down that far. We have these shops up here called Rudders. It's a gas station convenience store that also sells like hot food, on demand hot food.
Well, we have Wawa.
Okay, they might have their version. You might try their version of eggnog. My Rudders is directly across the street, like 100 feet across the street from me. It's very close, but they make the best eggnog. And typically people would taint it with brandy. Some people prefer rum. Try Kahlua. If any of you like a nip during the wintertime, one shot of Kahlua.
Interesting.
Mix it. No, really, mix. You have to pour the eggnog first because it's so thick. They're both very thick. If you pour the Kahlua in first, it'll just stay on the bottom. So if you pour it after the eggnog, it'll be easier to mix up. It is the most wonderful.
I like White Russians once in a while, but I always
superior to any rum or brandy you can put in eggnog.
Definitely.
I have a research associate who sends me a care package every year, which includes a bottle of moonshine eggnog.
Oh, nice.
That sounds good.
It's an acquired taste.
I've had moonshine, and not necessarily the flavored kinds, but yes, it is an acquired taste. Very much so.
Definitely. Well, one thing when it comes to Cthulhu and the creatures, I mean, what's some of the things that you can tell us about your thoughts on some of these creatures? Like, I mean, Cthulhu, there's like Babylonian tales of some serpent fish thing coming up and teaching people. Like, there's weird connections to other civilizations. What's some of the background on some of these crazy like fish gods and stuff?
It's one of those questions you don't know where to start hitting at it with. Lovecraft knew folklore extraordinarily well, and I don't think anything he wrote about a monster was deliberately focused on a mythological character, but I think there's enough features, because keep in mind, most of these creatures never actually physically show up in the pages. If you see it, you're so horrified you can't even describe it. So you have to leave clues in there, and maybe the mythology you're familiar with, maybe you're not. He loved his mythology. In fact, he was probably an amateur folklorist, which nobody gives him credit for. But in his I gotta remember which visit it is. In his 1930, the first visit to Florida, 31. I am not good with numbers. For a historian, I'm terrible with dates. His first visit.
Don't feel bad if you get it within 50. I'll count you as an A+. That's how we did it in my. I have a degree in art history from. Yeah, and so when then they say, what year was this? We'd be like, 1850s. Like, ding, ding. As long as it's 1851 or 1849, you're good.
1931. That's my final answer, Regis. He was in St. Augustine mostly. I mean, he did go to Dunedin. He did go to Key West. He did go to Miami. Hated Miami and Key West. Key West was quaint. It looked like a Caribbean village, and he desperately wanted to go to Havana, but never could afford it. But hated Miami.
I don't know. He seems to have gotten around pretty well. All those cities you just named. I mean, he's zipping all over the place. And for a time when transportation wasn't that not that reliable.
People say he's a hermit. Well, that hermit went as far as Cleveland and New Orleans and not Montreal and Maine. So yeah, he did pretty good for a hermit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, even so, for the time, 1937s or 1930s, probably when he's most active, 30s, 40s, 20s, 30s. Just think about it. I mean, transportation wasn't all that brand new either. I mean, it's only a 15, 20-year-old technology at the same time, So
he found a way to game the system with Greyhound. Greyhound would give you a ticket from Providence to Orlando. Direct line. Greyhound didn't have a bus that went direct from Providence to Orlando. So what they would do is they would make stops, and he would get off the bus. He would go explore. He would come back, get on the bus. So when you say he took the bus from Providence to Orlando, he never made it to Orlando. He was getting off in D-Land. But he would stop in Washington, D.C. He would stop in New York. He would stop in Richmond. He would stop in Charlottesville. He would stop in, he would pick a route where there were places he would wanted to go. And he knew the layovers, and he knew you didn't have to take the same bus the whole way. As long as you kept heading south, you could get off the boat, stay at the YMCA in Charlottesville, get back on the next bus heading that way. They didn't care. It was a trip. You were paying for a trip to Orlando. If you happened to take it over, a week, they didn't care. You couldn't take it and turn reverse direction, but he gamed that thing like a champ. Beautifully. I mean, it's still a work of art to this day.
Did he ever get to Europe? Because I think that's pretty much how people play the train systems in Europe. Because they do the same thing with the trains. Is you pay for one way and you get off and on here and there, and stop for lunch here, get back on, and go another hour and get dinner there. That kind of thing. So that's where you got the idea. Maybe I don't know.
He did the closest he came to out of the country was Canada.
Yeah,
Montreal. But one of his ongoing frustrations in life was he never got to Havana. And he was so close. I mean, you're 9 miles away from Havana when you're in Key West. But he just didn't have that extra spare change. He was short by like $15 for the round trip. And keep in mind, this guy was living on a can of beans and some crackers a day at some points because he was so desperate to travel. One of the highlights of his last trip to St. Augustine is that they had beans on sale at the local Piggly Wiggly. He got 5 cans for $0.25 and always traveled with silverware and a can opener.
Yeah.
And that was, he was not eating enough to keep somebody alive. And to this day, I have it in the back of my head that his diet was part of the reason why he developed intestinal cancer when he did. I mean, you can't live on canned beans and blocks of cheese and a donut and a coffee and call it a full day's meal.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And he was fairly young. I mean, 47 was when he passed. So
yeah. And I'm going to get back to the folklore thing before I forget, because you guys are as bad at staying on tangents as I am.
Yeah.
That's saying something, by the way. Folklore. And this leads back to where we started. He was in St. Augustine, and he talked to the locals. He found out about, who said what was haunted, who said what was there, what tourism to avoid. And he heard about a sea monster that had washed ashore. A giant octopus. Suddenly everybody's head goes, oh. He had heard about the forgotten St. Augustine giant octopus, which was the 1890s. It was a globster, a massive cartigen that had washed ashore out on Anastasia Island, and they tried to identify it as a giant octopus. And eventually they just buried it in place because, let's face it, it's gonna stink in the Florida sun. But he picks up this story. He never used it. This is not something that ties into Cthulhu. It already had been written, actually. Yes. But he tells this story to Robert Barlow, who was, again, he had not even met Barlow at this point. He Barlow is going, I hate Florida. I hate Florida. I hate Florida. I want to go back to Georgia. I hate Florida. I hate Florida. He never liked Florida, by the way. So Lovecraft is trying to give him material that he thinks will help cheer him up. And one of the stories he tells him is about a sea serpent that washed up on the beach. Well, Barlow doesn't specifically say that Lovecraft is the one who told him, but there's only one giant sea serpent washing up on the beach in that section of Florida. And there's only one person who knew about it who could have shared it with Barlow. So there's that level of folklore, both aggregating and being distributed. So there's your cryptozoology connection, by the way, or the first of many.
It makes sense because there was a book that was used for the Dungeons and Dragons RPG game in the 70s and 80s called Deities and Demigods, and the first printing of it had different myths, Celtic mythos, Egyptian mythos, Norse mythos, et cetera, but it also had the Lovecraftian mythos, and it had monsters and creatures from that, gibbering mouthers and other things. And one of them looked like the gibbering mouther was just like this mass with tentacles, suckers, and mouths everywhere. But they weren't allowed to use it. They didn't pay for any rights or copyrights to it. And there was also another mythos in there that they didn't pay the copyrights on. So the second printing, they had to take those. Huh?
Gray Mouser and Fafnir.
Yes, they were in there as well. Yep, exactly right.
I have my Greek Keds. I have a copy of the first edition still here.
There you go. Awesome.
But yes, I am truly still nerd. But Lovecraft copyright. There's an entire book that just came out last year by a scholar named Marcos Lagaria. And all it is a history of who really owned the rights to Lovecraft's works. And the answer is technically nobody, because he never final divorced his wife. So technically when he died, she should have gotten it, but she didn't know she had it because she thought she was divorced. In fact, she had remarried by that point. And so everything lapsed into copyright open turf at that point. I mean, Derleth is desperately trying to pretend people that he has the rights. He doesn't. I mean, there have been attempts to create an estate with relatives. There, Robert Barlow didn't have the rights.
Even if not, it's almost been 80 some years, isn't it? Like the standard copyright term is usually 85 years from the date of copyright, I do believe so.
Yes.
Even if someone had it, at some point they're going to fall off anyway.
August Derleth was bluffing. If he had tried to sue Sci-Fi magazine because they wanted to run a piece of Lovecraft stories, these are guys, teenagers with typewriters putting out a newsletter on Steno. They're going to blink first. The difference is Robert Barlow had the legal documentation. He eventually gave up in despair because he had moved to Mexico. He didn't have the strength or the energy to, teach himself to waddle and still fight with August Derleth. So Derleth got control of the estate by attrition, but technically there was no estate to control. It was all open it's
already public domain. Yeah.
So that's a mess.
I was looking through that Peter Rawlich's books. I'm not familiar with them, but that looks like a little journey in there that's interesting for sure. I'll have to check that out further. There's another one I want to get that Joe R. Lansdale, who's been on the show, he did like an anthology book that's Lovecraft. I haven't gotten a hold of that. I want to get to. It's just amazing how this stuff's still being empowered today, from this one person. It's very powerful.
Well, Pete Rollick's stuff I cannot recommend highly enough. The first book in the series was The Reanimate Whores, plural. And it's basically a doctor in Arkham's family is killed by one of West's escapees. And he then devotes the rest of his career to perfecting the serum and sabotaging Herbert West at the same time.
To check it out.
It's just amazing. He's got a gift for tying people in. He any pulp character you can think of, it's just thrown in there casually. It's if you blink once, you're going to miss references.
I'm going to check those out. They look good for sure. And you ever heard of Scott Martis? I know he passed away. He was big into cryptid sea monsters and stuff, and been on the show.
Yeah, I know Scott's work. I think I've got a couple of his books still floating around here. I tend to start packing stuff up when the books are done. He did a lot of work in Florida.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, well, Dave, while we're talking about globsters in Florida, I think you have a fantastic book that documents all of these marine cryptids. It's what your book is entitled, Sea Sand and Sea Serpents.
Sun, Sand, and Sea Serpents.
Okay. I think you are presenting all sides of, let's just say a newspaper article, and you did mention that an example earlier, but you look at the possibility of a hoax, your studies of animal behavior, so your readers get a comprehensive view of what could have been seen. Maybe we just don't know, but there were many eyewitnesses. You get the Kraken one is the one that took the fishing bait under a rock, and they couldn't.
Yeah,
They had to cut the line.
More of a generic term. So it's been in use since 1800s, and it was a giant squid, and then it was an octopus, and now it's a separate entity. But again, there are two things I believe in, particularly in cryptozoology, Lovecraft studies as well, and everything else I do. God, there's some odd ones there. Is that, first of all, context matters. You have to know, you can't say this guy saw a sea serpent in this lake, therefore there's a sea serpent in this lake. Why that lake? Could he have seen one? The fact that this sea serpent is in a landlocked lake makes you a little nervous, but nobody mentions whether it's landlocked. The other thing that I very strongly feel is not every sea serpent is a legitimate sighting of a cryptid. Are some real? Probably, possibly. Could it be a misidentification? Probably, possibly. But not every single one is going to be a sea serpent. And the only way to do that is to get rid of the fakes, get rid of the hoaxes, get rid of the newspaper fabrications.
I agree with you. Some of the TV shows that deal with some of these phenomena, particularly cryptos and ancient aliens, the guy with the hair, Giorgio, will grab a rock that has some weird, anybody could carve this thing on this rock design. He's like, look, evidence of aliens. No, it's not. It's just a rock with a design on it. It doesn't mean a thing.
I'm going to sneak away for a second. I got a window open in training.
Okay.
No problem. Yeah, and everybody, you're listening to United Public Radio 107.7 FM New Orleans. And I was supposed to plug this book at the beginning of the show, but I forgot. Beasts Beyond Belief, Sneaky Werewolves, Flying Cats, and Accidental Apes by Michael D. Winkle. Illustrated by Mel White. This nearly 200 tales of cryptid animals and other unusual beasts are contained in this well-researched book by Michael D. Winkle. Readers will encounter familiar monsters like Bigfoot, Nessie, dinosaurs, and ancient fish that have survived into the present day, and less well-known beings as flying cats and rabbits, brain-eating horrors, and interdimensional hamsters. And that's by Uncle Bear Publishing. They're just making some books, and you can check it out. Beasts Beyond Belief, Sneaky Werewolves, Flying Cats, and Accidental Apes. So check it out. So what's up with Tyrone Ellington? You ready for that next week, Mark? He just said he's ready. I just got to send him a StreamYard soon.
Yeah. I think Tyrone is going to bring some interesting stories. He's been, when he was in the service, he was in the Afghanistan, like that. It's Middle East area. I don't know if that's the right geography, but his book is really well done, and he's been to some of the places he's writing about. He makes some great points about the Renaissance that started like 3200 BC. Very, very interesting. He has a well done book.
It'll be a good show. We got some great. I always try to get great guests for Halloween, and we got David here. That's as good as you can get. We got Tyrone. We got the Jacob dude coming on for Pumpkin Guts, the Hellbound Halloween. Last year we had Dara, was it Mason, about Father of the Crossroads, Song of the Dark Man. He had just been on with Whitley Strieber, and that was a crazy one about the devil. That one was real creepy. That was our Halloween one, but this one's going to be good this year as well. And it's good to have an H.P. Lovecraft show. That's for damn sure. So, Dave, what are some things about H.P. Lovecraft, some of the most unique things that maybe other people don't know, or the first stuff that kind of pops up that you love about H.P. Lovecraft, or things that come up that you like to talk about with him?
Well, that's a broad stroke.
I'm trying to get some of the deep, the dirt, some of the good stuff.
H.P. Lovecraft was born, raised, lived, and died in Providence, Rhode Island. He has a grave marker that says on it something he proclaimed in letters: I am Providence. Having said that, he could barely function under 50 degrees. If it dropped down below freezing, he was housebound. If he went out, there was a good chance he was going to pass out. He is not built to be a New Englander, and was seriously considering going south. He had a standing offer from the Barlows to live in their old a cabin on the property, but Whitehead offered him room as well. Everybody who knew him was perfectly okay with him coming to live with them, and he basically said, "Love to, could, maybe 10 more years I might, but it'll be St. Augustine. I gotta have the history." His biggest complaint about
what was it that made him pass out in the cold? Was it some kind of pathology that he had? Why was he passing out in the cold?
There have been all sorts of armchair physicians, including myself. Who is it? L. Sprague de Camp goes so far as to suggest that Lovecraft had a disorder that made him almost cold-blooded, which is absolute and utter rot. Personally, when my book comes out, finally, it is going to be my theory that it's malnutrition, because they have found that in lab rats that it occurs, that there is almost a hypothermic reaction to lower temperatures because of poor nutrition.
Oh, it also almost sounds like low blood pressure as well.
Yep. I mean, his wife talks about them walking outside in cold weather, and she practically had to drag him inside the house. He was so completely disabled by the cold. So, Salem, Massachusetts. God, no, not Salem, New Hampshire. Salem, Massachusetts is the archetype for Arkham, except that Salem doesn't have a college. The college happened to be Brown University in Providence, which was his landlord for a good chunk of his life. So Miskatonic University is Brown, but Miskatonic is located in Arkham, which is probably almost entirely based on Salem, including the history of witches. And Marblehead is Kingsport. Dunwich is way too far out to be a Massachusetts river valley. I mean, that would be the Connecticut River. It's so long. But there is no river that corresponds with going out as far as Attle or Wilbraham all the way down into the center of state and then make a jog up into the north and then exit into the Cape Ann Bay. Salem and Marblehead, or if you prefer Arkham and Kingsport, are on Cape Ann, Massachusetts, which is also the Cape Ann Sea Serpent. How's that for tying both topics back together? Lovecraft was a big eater, but it had to be stuff he liked. Seafood made him ill, even the scent of it. But he could walk into a ice cream shop and have all 32 flavors.
Sounds like me.
Did not drink. Knew a lot more famous people than is the key word. A lot of names that are no longer well known. Samuel Loveman, who's a very well known poet up until the 60s. Hart Crane, another well known poet. They were friends of his. Frank Belknap Long was a major science fiction writer into the 50s and 60s. Henry Whitehead was a leading contributor to Weird Tales and was about to break into the glossy field when he died. He was so prolific and so skilled, he would probably be considered the fourth horseman. The three Weird Tale horsemen being Clark Ashton Smith, Robert E. Howard, and of course Lovecraft.
Wasn't there some Robert Howard and Lovecraft correspondence as well, wasn't there?
Oh, that's a 2-volume set. In fact, I think they made it.
Jeez.
Lovecraft's correspondence to Howard, I believe, is 2 volumes.
Wow.
They've also published a lot of Robert E. Howard's general correspondence, and I think that's like a 4-volume set. But
yeah,
very different styles. You know, Conan versus Cthulhu.
Yeah. What is the movie with Renee Zellweger? Did you ever see that one? The Whole Wide World, with Vincent D'Onofrio playing Howard, and I know there's some mention, I think, of that Lovecraft correspondence in that movie.
Yes, her estate has been giving permission to pulp historian scholar Bobby Deary to reprint some of her letters. So the Robert E. Howard crowd is getting some real good stuff these days. The Lovecraft studies is pretty well starting to dry up. They're putting out one more book, which is the collected letters of H.P. Lovecraft and Frank Belknap Long, which is it's a shelf breaker. It's a hardcover 900-page monster. In fact, I've been trying to figure out how I'm going to shelve all of my correspondence of Lovecraft books on one shelf with this thing. I may build the shelf with it as the base. But it's an exciting time in pulp studies as opposed to Lovecraft studies. I do some oddball stuff. I should do a disclaimer. I am the recently appointed president of the Fossils, which is the Historians of Amateur Journalism. And I tend to put all my oddball, that's a polite word, oddball articles in their newsletter, which is available online at thefossils.org. I do encourage you, if you're interested in amateur journalism or Lovecraft and that ilk, probably you should join the group. And I don't say that just as the president. I say that as somebody who is just really a big fan of the organization. That's where you get your Tryout Smith material as well. But I publish things there like the sense of humor. The part I was mentioning about the Red Line in Boston, that's an article in the Fossil. I did an entire article on Lovecraft's visit to Silver Springs, Florida. And at a time when they were advertising that they had filmed a Tarzan movie there. They had not. Johnny Weissmuller had actually was filmed in the Silver River speed swimming, but he was on a promotional tour for BVD swimwear. Before the movie.
So it became BVD underwear.
No, well, I don't think you do that in the swimwear. It slows you down.
No. I mean, the company later on, they don't. I think they stopped making bathing suits. They just did underwear.
That's because Johnny Weissmuller retired.
Oh, I guess so. Your cash cow goes. What are you going to do?
Johnny Weissmuller was touring the country. I mean, he even swam in the Chicago River.
Yeah.
But this was before Tarzan. So when they made the first 2 or 3 Tarzan movies, you'll always see there's a scene where he has to jump in the water and swim. That was shot at Silver Springs, but it wasn't shot for the Tarzan movies. They just advertised that he had been there.
That's funny.
So I called that article, of course, Lovecraft in Loincloth.
Mark, are you still there? You okay, Mark? Maybe he stepped away for a second, which is fine, but I was just making
sure. Him. Everybody needs a break from me.
Yeah,
he might have gone potty.
For sure. Well, it's interesting, Florida, it's a weird place. There's definitely so much history and definitely with cryptids and everything. I know Stacy Brown, I don't know if you ever heard of him. He's on a lot of the Bigfoot shows, and him and his dad up here got some weird thing on the thermal cam and won some contest and got 35 grand or something, but it was like a Bigfoot or something really weird. I've also heard that there are some ranches around here like Skinwalker Ranch that they've been investigating, but they can't tell you what place they are because the people don't want to hurt their business and stuff. So there's a lot of weirdness in Florida for sure. What's some of the weirdest stuff about Florida that's come up with some of this cryptid stuff? A lot. I know. I got the showbanger stoner questions for you.
Yeah, he doesn't ask any hard ones, does he, David?
I should have segued at some point. Florida, up on the Panhandle, there was a sea monster that got hooked on a ship. The steamer ship was they used to send these ships out with tourists, and they would run a feeder line, and the fish would get caught, and then of course they would reel it in, and the fish would then be given to the tourists, and they could all claim they had been fishing in the Gulf. Something big hooked it, and they actually were pulled by this thing, and they eventually tired it out and reeled it in, and it managed to unload every gun on the boat, and apparently there were a number of them, and bring it ashore. And what they are describing is a primitive form of shark known as a frilled shark. The teeth are corkscrewed and inverted so that once it bites, it don't let go. And it has the gills are positioned so that the top gill goes all the way around, almost entirely around the throat, and it makes it look like it's frilled. The thing is, frilled sharks don't get that big. The biggest fossil record of them is nowhere near this big as whatever this thing was they caught. They still exist, but 3 foot, 4 foot, maybe 5 foot on a good day. And then they started to see there's a whole spate of these giant frilled sharks being seen across the waters of Florida. They saw them down in Miami. They saw them up and down the Gulf Coast. Still don't know what it is. I can't discount it. It's too many sightings in too many places that are too consistent, but it's not a species I've been able to identify other than a giant frilled shark, which is not a thing. Welcome to cryptozoology.
What else you got in there, Mark, in your bag of coyote goodies?
Yeah, so sorry I had to step away for a second. You've done some work with Lauren Coleman.
I am on the board of directors of his International Cryptozoology Museum.
Oh, cool.
I even got a business card. I had to print it and pay for it myself, but I have a business card.
Okay, so how's Lauren? What's going on with the museum?
Funny you should ask. The museum is leaving Portland in the spring. They will close the door in Portland on one day, and the next day they will open up at a new building in Bangor. The Bangor property is larger. It is a historically significant building, and more importantly, the museum owns it. They're not paying rent to somebody in Portland. It's going to be huge. It is going to allow the museum to exhibit material that hasn't been seen in decades, if ever, because now we have the room to do it. We're hoping to put a research library in as well. And they're going to do a lot with the history of the building. It's a art moderne building, very pretty, desperately needed some loving care. Probably a little more than we should have, but it's going to be spectacular. All you got to do is get to Bangor.
How old's the building?
It's only a 1920s building, but it's almost, there's not a lot of Art Deco buildings left anywhere. I mean, in Haverhill, since I know that town better than the other, it's gone.
This house I'm in that I bought was built in 1920.
Art Deco styling?
It's pretty close. It's a duplex. The interior is used to have working transoms. They're not working anymore, but the glass is still there. So they might, if I come into some money, they might maybe be repaired and restored. I don't know.
Now, when we moved to Florida 25 odd years ago, and some of them have been very odd, we were asked by the realtor, we see what you want, and there's not a lot of, you're not going to you can't really get a lot of land. You can't get a lot of property unless you go west. And I said, we don't care. I work from home. She works from home. And they said, do you mind if it's a little bit of an older house? And we look at her and said, my parents were in a house that was built between the wars. Her family, she was born and raised in a Victorian. And she looks at us and says, I meant 1970s. Florida.
Yeah. Lauren awarded my book Praise for the Hairy Man, The Secret Life of Bigfoot, like an award one year. I forget the year, 2010, and like a write-up. That was really cool. And he also helped me during Hurricane Michael. So props to Lauren for sure. And definitely so much to learn from you. I really enjoy having you on, and just a lot of stuff. I just like to learn all this stuff, and that's why we're here. But it's definitely good to know you, and I'm glad you're on here for our Halloween show.
Lauren, I worked on a book with Lauren just recently on mermaids.
Oh, cool.
But not mermaids. I don't know if you're familiar with the cryptozoologist Mark Hall.
No.
The deceased, he had a theory that mermaids were actually mammals, specifically primates, that they were apes descended from Oreopithecus, which was a swamp-dwelling ape, and they stayed near the coast while the rest of the apes went into the savanna, and they were eating the seafood and getting smarter and learned that they could go deeper and avoid predators, so they continued to live on the ocean. They developed eyes that could see better underwater. There were humans that do this. Developed better lung capacity, and got smart enough to be able to design costumes to swim faster. And that's what a mermaid is. People see a humanoid figure wearing a tail. It's actually one of his Oreopithecine relatives. It's an interesting book. I mean, I did what I could with it, but I got to admit it's really not a theory I buy into very strongly.
Well, yeah, I don't need there's a very famous bar. I don't know if you call it a dive bar or not, but and I don't remember the name of it, but it's in Florida, and one of my friends on Facebook is an entertainer there, and it's got a pool that surrounds, I don't know if it's the whole bar or just one wall, but there's like 6 or 7 portals that look into the pool, and she and the lady she trains swim as mermaids while people drink inside the bar. And it's not a nude show. They have bikini tops.
And if you drink enough, you don't even need the woman there. She's a Pirelli. I know the bar you mean. I cannot think of the name of it, but it actually shows up in Grindhouse films from William Griffey.
Yeah.
And it's going to bother me all night that I can't think of
one with Dennis Hopper that's old. That's a mermaid movie. I can't remember the name of it. It's old, maybe black and white with Dennis Hopper, and he like meets a mermaid chick or something. It's Night Tide or something.
That's all stuff that's probably in my old Horror Guide to Florida book.
Yeah, I'd like to see that again. There's some
David, just for a clue real quick before we move on, the lead entertainer at this bar we both know the name of, but can't recall it. Her name is Medusa Rena. So like Medusa and Sirena and Siren, so it's Medusa Sirena. She's the main act, and she trains all the other girls. So maybe a Google search under her the bar will come up. So
there's some creepy stuff going around, and I'm not saying I believe it, but there's like this lady on TikTok telling this weird story about someone she knows that worked on the fishing boats, and basically the fishermen would have like this on the side job besides normal catching stuff that they do for rich people, and it was capturing these mermaid like creatures, and then the rich people would have like a dinner and eat them for immortality and weird stuff going around lately. That's kind of probably stupid but amusing. But you never know.
Right from Japanese lore. That's a Japanese folklore motif.
Yeah, it might be true. It wouldn't put it past rich people. Maybe, I don't know. They might eat them.
Well, the creature, the Japanese mermaid is a kappa, CAPPA.
Yes, but they're evil. Yes,
it grant immortality.
It was a creepy story. The lady was like on TikTok telling it like she was like, like it was real. So, I mean, who knows? Anything's possible, but definitely weird.
Yeah, I'm working on an encyclopedia of sea serpents for an academic press. And I'm thinking I'm going to have to pull the mermaids out for size. I'm only allowed like 200,000 words.
Yeah.
Which for me is actually not that far of a stretch, but they want a 2-volume set. One would be water sea serpents, the other would be water spirits and sea gods. But I think there's so much mermaid material now out there that I almost think there's a third book there, because the Oreopithecus book, Mark Hall's book, does not allow for the folklore mermaids. So
I found it or somewhere on a TV show or something.
Found it.
I've seen that on some kind of TV show that I've seen not too long ago. I can't remember it though right now.
It's apparently been a thing of the bar since however long it's been opened. When I was a kid, my dad when he was doing work with the Navy and EG&G. We lived in Fort Lauderdale, where this bar is. So, good reason to go back. I was 3 years old, 4 years old. I don't remember anything else about the town, but it's just a neat idea. They have regular shows, and you can go and see the mermaids swim around, and like David said, if you get enough rum or gin in you don't need the mermaids. They'll show up eventually on their own.
That appeared in a film by William Griffey called Mako, The Jaws of Death. And I'm pulling that out of thin air, let me tell you.
It's been featured in a few other places too, TV shows and such like.
That's the only one I can think of, and the fact that I can remember it at all, I'm very pleased with myself.
Yeah.
That Dennis Hopper movie is Night Tide. It's 1961.
Yep.
1961.
Okay, so since we are talking about some of these classic movies, Dave, you also have a book on Florida's horror movie sites. What? Okay, you go into where some of the movies were filmed. What may have spawned the idea for the movies. Just kind of covering a little bit of everything.
What movies is there? A lot? I mean, probably a lot, but what's some of the big ones?
Okay, well let's ask the
Lagoon?
author. What Creature of the Black from the Black Lagoon?
All three of them, all filmed. Yeah. In fact, you can tell where they were filmed by where Rico Browning, the underwater stunt guy, was working at the time. Silver Springs one time, another place another time. The third movie, particularly, they tended to reuse underwater footage rather than pay somebody to shoot more. But they changed the eyes between the two movies, so you can tell which movie they stole it from. Little things like that keep me amused. The second movie is filmed at Marineland, outside of St. Augustine, which is now Marineland Dolphin Adventures, and it was filmed on the piers in St. John's. So I mean, it's definitely a walk through memory lane. Other big ones that were filmed down here. Anything by Herschel Gordon Lewis, anything by William Griffey. So it depends on what your definition of big is.
I wonder some of the scenes from Jaws filmed there.
Oh yeah, Jaws 2 were filmed out on the Panhandle. They learned the hard way during the first one. It was too cold to film in the water off New England. And you can get a lot warmer water out in the Panhandle.
Just a little bit.
Just a bit.
Only a degree or two, but
who's the Griffin guy? I looked up the other guy. I've heard of Wizard
Bill Griffey. Griffey, Grefe.
What did he do? What movie?
Well, where to start?
A big one.
Mako Jaws of Death is the one we were talking about.
Okay, let me look. I'm just looking them up.
Nice guy. Herschel Gordon Lewis has died recently, but when you see blood on screen, online, on stage gore, that is because of Herschel Gordon Lewis. Herschel Gordon Lewis was part of a team with a fellow named Friedman who were making art films, which was a polite way of saying courts protected nudie films. It was a genre of films down here on the benefits of naturalism, which is a polite way of saying the nudist camps. So that once that whole thing blew over in the courts, then you got into the nudie cutie films. And when that started to die out, he went into horror. The problem was nobody had done anything with horror. He developed the first blood you could put in your mouth and spit out when something hurt you that didn't poison you at the same time. It was actually basically Metamucil with red food dye, but it was patented. It opened up an entire career for makeup, special effects makeup down here for years. But Oh yeah, they went to the butcher shops, bought entrails, and it was. I mean, these movies are garbage. Make no mistake. They had the biggest budget item was the fake blood, but it was a novelty, and you couldn't get them out of the drive-ins. They were just making money hand over fist because they were so new and so hokey.
It's funny. It's funny you mentioned that the fake blood was the most expensive thing on the budget. Just for reference, when we made it in college when we were doing video, I think it was a total of like about $7 or $8. It was under $10 for a bottle of Caro syrup and a bottle of red, a bottle of blue, and a bottle of yellow food coloring. That's all you need.
I wonder if Lovecraft saw Nosferatu. That's one of my favorites, Nosferatu.
You know, that's a very good question.
Maybe so. You never know.
I don't remember him mentioning any silent films that particularly struck his fancy, but the time period is correct.
Yeah, it's possible, but maybe he just didn't mention it, or who knows.
Well, when he was staying with Barlow, you walked 14 miles to the nearest town. There was one movie theater, so you watched whatever was playing, but so it was usually, well, 1930s melodramas, that sort of thing. And he mentioned some of them, but he's not a big film buff, and a part of it is I think that they simply couldn't afford it regularly. I mean, his money.
They were still relatively inexpensive. My mom told me about stories back then in the 30s and 40s before the war, and maybe a little bit after that. My grandmother would give my aunt and my mom a quarter, not a quarter each, a quarter. They would go into Wilmington, Delaware on a bus, go to the movie theater, get a bucket of popcorn and a soda to share each. Then after the movie, and the movies back then, it wasn't just you go in and the movie's over, you leave. You go in, you could be in the middle of the movie, you'd have to wait for it to recycle. And what it would happen is you'd get a few cartoons, maybe a quick comedy, melodrama or comedy, like you said, maybe some newsreels, and then the feature length thing, which was about 45 or 50 minutes long. And then the whole thing would start back over with the cartoons again. And you could stay and watch all day, and they didn't care. It was like $1, like a penny, 2 cents, whatever. After the movie, they would go to the store, get about a loaf of bread or a dozen eggs, whatever my nanny needed. They would get back on the bus, back home to the suburbs outside. And my grandmother requested the change from the quarter my aunt and mother used to go out to the movies on a weekend Saturday. So the economies are a lot different. Things were so much different back then. It's a different time frame, you know?
Yeah. Well, to put it in perspective, on Lovecraft's last visit to Florida, he threw a shoe, if you will. He had to have his shoe patched. And he was absolutely horrified that it cost him 25 cents to have the shoe patched. 25 cents was, a week's meals for him in some cases.
Yeah.
His money was so tight that he was keeping track of who was getting postcards and who wasn't, because he couldn't afford the postage like he used to.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the man had no business being in Florida, with all due respect to the man.
It doesn't sound like he had much need of, or it didn't sound like he was very good with money. Basically, I think maybe he had a
was very good
CPA or
with
something
money. He
managed
just
for
didn't
him.
have
He'd have
any.
gone further, but he doesn't sound like he's very good with the cash.
I think he was, because he could survive on what he had, but I just don't think he had any cash.
Well, what I was reading on him on Wikipedia just now, when his father passed, he had some money until he from traveling everywhere. He spent it all up. Then when his mother was institutionalized, he came into some more cash, and he traveled again, just like you described earlier in the show. He spent all that up. So apparently he did have money. He just didn't have any skill handling money, or at least, but I guess maybe at the end, when he was destitute and broken poor, that's when he was forced to budget on a quarter. But when he had it beforehand, it just doesn't seem like he was good at managing it, which is unfortunate because he could have he could have made it if and it's hard to know if he would have tried to get on the Hollywood bandwagon. Like I said earlier in the show, what did he think of Hollywood? Apparently, he's not that big of a movie buff, but you don't have to like movies to sell your stories and images and make money off of the profits of toy sales and residuals and such like that. So it's a real shame because he had a lot of great stories.
But he was in D-Land for 3 months and then 6 months. 9 months in D-Land. We can only confirm one movie he saw, and that of all things was The House of Rothschild.
Yeah.
And he had to ask his aunt what a bazooka was. So, but the fun thing about that movie is not the fact that it was the movie. He saw the first Popeye cartoon.
Okay, and Dave, while we had, we're kind of winding down.
5 minutes.
Oh, gee, okay. My question, which is going to require a short response, is you just about broke the Mitchell Hedges skull.
Yes.
Yeah, you did allude to that earlier in the show.
There's no such thing as a short answer in my life. Yes. I was managing America Stonehenge. And this is a long time ago. Let's see, I wasn't married, so that's back 35 years. So it was a long time ago. I was running it, probably the 80s. And Anna Mitchell Hedges was still alive. And she was seriously elderly. I don't think she was 100% aware of what was going on at any given moment with her. But she had a handler, and they were at a psychic fair in Salem, New Hampshire, and someone came up with the bright idea, let's take the crystal skull up and put it on the sacrificial table and see what happens. So they show up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon at the end of the season when we're trying to get the place ready to shut down for the winter. There is a roaring fire in the Franklin stove, and they come in. And their handler has got the crystal skull in a velvet lined container. Now, I'm going to see who's older than me. When I say a velvet lined container, I mean it's an old box that a slide projector was in. The cheap plastic cardboard that flipped open at the top, and it had a lining of felt on the inside to prevent static. Mm-hmm. It was a cheap, simple box. And while we were all running around trying to make arrangements to get this poor little old lady up the hill, because she was not capable of walking, the owner, Bob Stone, ended up driving his car up there. We won't talk about his undercarriage. I was running around the building, and they put it in a blind corner around where I was running. And I'm moving as fast as I can because everything is happening at once. I look down, and there's the case with the crystal skull, practically no protection. And my foot is coming right at it like I'm about to kick a field goal in my steel-toed boots.
Oh, jeez.
If I had hit it and it survived, it would have gone straight slammed into the roaring golden hot Franklin stove, which would have ignited the case. By sheer dumb luck, I was able to hoist my foot up high enough to clear the case. But I still wake up in a cold sweat at what would have happened to me if I was the guy who had destroyed the crystal skull.
Were you able to convince everyone in the room that saw you that you were actually trying to train for a steeplechase later on in the year?
No, but I probably could have at that point.
Yeah.
and just for the record, they put it up there, and the crystal skull, they put it on a display case, on a stand they used to display it. It was a Lazy Susan.
Yeah.
And of course, when they put it on the sacrificial table, which is not 100% plumb, it rotated. Of course, it rotated. It's got a center of gravity and it's off center.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah,
Well,
that's my crystal skull story.
Well, we got about
Cool.
2 minutes. Thanks, Dave, for a wonderful Halloween show. It's always great to find a great, unique guest for my lineup. I always try to make it special, and you definitely fit in with this one for sure. And I appreciate it so much. It's been great. Thank you. What's your website and everything? If you got a link or anything?
My last name is my website, so it's goudsward.com. You get to that page, you'll see a picture of myself and my brother. Just click on my smiling face, and it'll take you into my page. Not a lot there, other than a list of books that nobody will ever read.
Well, maybe they will now.
I've really gotten into the academic press publications, which usually mean they're outpriced to the point where even I don't sell them at appearances. I can't afford them.
Well, we've been hitting about 1 million listeners or so, last I heard. So I hope it helps in some way. And,
every little bit.
Definitely. And I hope to get you back sometime. It's been great to meet you. And thanks so much. And happy Halloween. And stay in touch with your next
Halloween.
Yeah,
Happy
thanks, David.
Halloween. We actually had trick-or-treaters last year, which I had never seen here ever in my life. They were everywhere. I was like, it felt like a Twilight Zone episode. Like they were all over the place.
Oh, never. 25 years in this house, never had one. The
They
street
never
has
did.
no street lights. It's a rural street with a dead end, and I don't have house lights, and I have a long, spooky driveway surrounded by silk floss trees, which of course have half-inch to 1-inch thorns on them.
Nice.
I eat a lot of chocolate in November.
All right, everybody. You listen to United Public Radio 107.7 FM New Orleans. Have a good weekend. Good night.